We've got some Battletech Q&A, working my way through some Battletech mailbag. We've got a request regarding infantry. Fritz, all infantry list. I'm looking at a lot of stands of infantry for the battle value. What are some tactics in playing this, in utilizing it? That's what we're going to jump into and explore in this vlog. Now, the great thing about Battletech is the worst thing about Battletech. There are so many fun toys to play. You could do an all-infantry type list. I think a hybrid, at a minimum, combined arms list is a lot more interesting in terms of our artillery, field guns, vehicles, and air support. But also throwing in a couple of mechs. Maybe you throw in an Irby. Maybe you throw in a couple of light mechs as support. There are so many great things to play in Battletech. Never enough battle value. Rules is written. You could play all mechs, you could play all infantry, you could play a mix of them. So from that perspective, there have been a few times where I've played an infantry-heavy list. I'm thinking the only time I played infantry exclusively was in a couple of games, infantry with tanks and support vehicles, so Planetary Defense Force. The only mech I took was an Irby. I had to, just for the sake of it. Not because I can't play Battletech without a mech, because just the honor of Irby always demands it. And it was the autocannon 20 type variant. So nothing's going to stop you in the rules. But how does it play out? Is it fun? And how does it begin to break down? The main thing is battle value. Battle value. You're going to bring like 6K. I want to say like what's a standard inner sphere game of Battletech? 6 to 8K. I mean, I can't answer that. Every group is different. We tend to play 6 to 8K. You got 8K of infantry? I mean, that's a lot. Setup is just like half of the hex map back in just infantry, just waves and waves of infantry. The logistics of playing that's a lot to play. That's a lot to utilize. Is that going to lead to a fun game? That's why I advocate combined arms, which totally makes sense from a narrative point of view. Mechs are rare. In the novels and in the game, everyone's mech'd up, mech on mech battle. But to see and utilize battle mechs, given the inner sphere, that's huge. So it would not be out of the norm to have a lance or two supported by lots of vehicles and infantry, or if it's a planetary defense force, or kind of that first wave, being entirely infantry and vehicles against mechs, whether they're mechs from a house or whether it's a mercenary force. It's not out of the ordinary to encounter that in the narrative. So the first thing I would be looking at is two groups of infantry. And the exact battle value, let's just say we've got enough to play with. I'd want a group that is going to be static and not move at all. They're going to look to get in cover. They're going to look to embed themselves, longer range LRM type mix of units, maybe some shorter range SRM or laser type units. And they're just going to look to dominate my deployment zone and my area of the board. They're not really going to advance that much. They're way too slow. I'm essentially looking to create compression. Think about, let's just say we're playing on one hex map, one unit. If I can compress and just shut off half of the board in terms of where you can navigate and what you can do, that is massive. That's before we get into mission. Now, if the mission is attacker versus defender and you've got to wade into all that infantry dug in, that's huge. If it's secure objectives or table quarters or a recon type thing, that's absolutely deadly. You have to walk into my deployment zone or my half of the map. That's really huge. But just before we even layer over a mission, again, just the physical maneuverability that we have. If I shut off half the map, you walk into that, it's just going to be absolutely bonkers. That's huge. The second aspect, we need stuff that can transport and get delivered now to your side, my opponent's side of the table. We need stuff that's fast moving. Are we going to do it with Karnovs? Are we going to do it with APCs? Are we going to go in with supported APC type vehicles, maybe goblins or hover type units? This is now where we get some fast-moving stuff with tanks and infantry to combine both of them. That's potent. If you throw in a couple of fast-moving autocannon 20s, that gets even more crazy. So when your infantry hit, we've got half the hex map shut off. My infantry are just hot dropping, moving in, redeploying into your zone. Insignificant numbers. We're not talking like 1 or 2 units. Insignificant numbers backed by autocannon 20s. That's huge because the infantry need to be at point blank. Perfect examples. For the lulls, I'll play autocannon 20s on a Karnov because I've got enough of the miniatures. Saladin heavy tanks. One shot, but look, you take 2 or 3. That is absolutely huge. And now I don't want to overdo it because even though we can get a lot of infantry for battle value, we need to hold some back because we've got 2 other aspects of this battle group, this list that we're building. I've got my part of the hex map shut off. I'm dropping into your deployment zone, multiple targets, tracking multiple targets, lots of infantry, jump infantry, vehicles to deliver, autocannon 20s. Now I want something that's fire base, something that's going to have long-range punch out of my deployment zone or out of my controlled area where my opponent wants to close. They can't deal with this type of barrage. Now, maybe if they have an archer or longbow, they can hit at long range. I'll look to target those mechs first with my Saladins and my autocannon 20s and my other infantry. I want to pull my opponent in to my infantry stands because I don't have the mobility for most of them. Now, look, you could spend battle value and just mech everybody up, do like mobile cavalry. You could do that. That's a possibility. If you have higher battle value and you have the models, infantry is so cheap, absolutely. But even with that, I'm going to roll out at a certain point. I want to pull, even if I'm mechanized, I want to be able to pull my opponent into that. We're looking at field guns. We're looking at Shrek PPC carriers. A little pricey, but balancing out. You take 3 of those. You take a couple of those PPC carriers, 3 PPCs a turn, get them hull down. The opposing mechs, they want to close. They want to get to medium range. They want to get to short range and really smoke that. Again, unless they have dedicated Jaeger mechs or autocannon mechs or stuff with the ability to fire multiple LRM 20 packs. But you'll look to neutralize those first. And then the final layer, depending on battle value, depending on models, I would look at some light artillery, maybe some thumpers, just to encourage the random, just to keep my opponent moving. Or I would look at probably air support in terms of warriors, or I'm looking at air support. I won't say mech busters, but some sort of air support that is going to be able to harass and keep moving against the opponent. Combining the best of them with the infantry, that's a potent force. That is a force that could absolutely take on infantry. Now, why not always play that, right? Let's just say, like, modeling resources aside, and there's a lot of fantastic model sources out there for it. The reason why is that's a long game, first of all. Rules is written, infantry are going. I mean, some people have house-ruled infantry. Outside of that, you're going to win initiative every time. That's a lot of shots to resolve. That's a lot to play. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's a lot more bookkeeping, especially if you're layering in lots and lots of vehicles because you're spending the least amount on infantry. I mean, I was tracking 20 infantry stands at one point. I had to make like little numbers to put next to them because the infantry sheets, as they took damage, I had to be fair and track that. The second aspect is, depending on the size of the map, it doesn't always work out. I'm limiting this for the sake of the vlog exercise to 1 hex map. If it's 2 hex maps, that's a lot more terrain. Mechs could potentially outmaneuver you, especially if they have dedicated ways to dealing with it. I'm not saying that I know ahead of time I'm going to fight all infantry and take everyone with machine guns and flamers, but there's enough variety of mechs that can fulfill an anti-infantry role and aren't dedicated that will chew through stuff really fast. So if you're spread out against 2 hex maps or more, or it's a traditional wargaming table, you're spread out, I will look to take you on at the corners. I will look to chip away and quickly neutralize your infantry. So it nullifies their power very, very fast the more someone has maneuverability. Of course, you could counter that with your own maneuverability if you built out your infantry list to have that. And it's not just like, oh, let me take a bunch of infantry stands, good to go. That'd also be kind of a boring game because there's not a lot of give and take. But it goes back to the first question. And I'm a big fan of infantry. I'm a big fan of tanks. I love it. Never enough battle value. With all the things to take in Battletech and have fun with and explore, that's why I'm a big advocate for complete combined arms. I try in every game, assuming my opponent also has the miniatures to potentially match it or counter it, or at least make decisions. I like to start with a core group of mechs, so I get that Battletech flavor, I get that mech flavor. I take infantry, I take some vehicles, I'll take some light air on that. Maybe I'll layer in some light artillery if I have the battle value and it's a big enough game. A little bit of everything to not only tactically support each other, but also to get that complete Battletech feeling of playing all of my miniatures. But in the narrative, in the rules as written, yeah, you could do it. You could totally do it.